Hey, what's up? So there is when God wrote the commandments for Israel on tablets of stone, you remember that deal, right? You've either read it or you've seen it in the movies. There's a reason that the first one is first. This one that we just read, you shall have no other gods before me. There's a reason that that's first. Now, there's some practical reasons around that, right? Because Israel was going to be inhabiting land that was surrounded by all of these pagan nations that didn't believe in the covenant God of Israel, Yahweh. And so they wanted to make sure, God wanted to make sure that his people were focused upon him and that they were loving him above all other gods that were represented there. And it was also kind of noticeable that this was kind of a barricade command. In other words, if you couldn't fulfill the first one, if you couldn't love God first and foremost above all other gods, then everything else that he commanded was going to come off the tracks and was going to be kind of offside at that point, right? So as I began to think about this very first commandment about you shall have no other gods before me, I started thinking about it quite a bit, and it led me to think about The Bachelor. Yeah. Now, some of you are thinking that maybe I was smoking crayons before I walked in here, and that's not the case. I'm gonna help you understand why I'm thinking along that line in just a minute. But you've probably seen The Bachelor. I'm guessing that maybe you have. Maybe you haven't. If you have, I'm praying for you. 23rd season that this thing is going on. It's one of the top 20 shows in American culture. And I've asked a number of people like, hey, would you explain to me, just give me a quick explanation. Why do you watch this? Like, I've asked a number of people because I'm just curious. Like, why do you watch this? And maybe the most famous answer that I get is usually something along this line. Well, and that's how it starts typically. Well, it's just the fairy tale of the whole thing. The fairy tale. Quick explanation, just a quick kind of English breakdown right here. Here's what fairy tale means in English. Not real. Not real, right? So that's one reason that people have a tendency to watch it, and maybe they also watch it because of some other reasons. I don't know, but I have a tendency. I have a tendency to think that there's maybe more sinister reasons as to why people watch The Bachelor. This is me and maybe my little jaded brain working itself out, but I have a tendency to think that maybe people there's other reasons. One is that maybe people that are either not in a relationship or are in a dead relationship emotionally, they just want to feel something vicariously. And so they're like, I'm just watching it because I'm not in a relationship and I just want to feel something right now. Oh, I like him. Oh, I like her, right? Whatever. And maybe that's a reason, or maybe it's because you're in a dead relationship emotionally, and you're like, at least I can get some of the feels watching this television show that I can't get when I'm hanging out with my man. But I also think there's something more sinister going on here. Here's what I really think. I really think that the primary reason that people are actually watching The Bachelor is because regular people like watching perfect people deal with insecurities. Regular people, imperfect people like me and you, right? I'd never be on The Bachelor. Like, I'm gray-headed, I'm losing hair, I'm sane. Like, I'd never be on The Bachelor, right? So I couldn't be there. But regular people like watching seemingly perfect people deal with insecurities. I mean, think about this. I know it's a TV show, but these are real for the people that are in the show. I'm talking so fast. You're awesome. Just keep going. Because it's like, she's going to need a massage by the time I'm done. That's great. So the insecurities are real for them, right? I mean, think about it this way. I actually heard, I don't watch the show, but I've kind of did a little research so that I knew what I was talking about. There was apparently one dude who was on the show who actually told at least four different women that they all had a piece of his heart. So ladies, are you good with that? Like, are you good with 25% of your man's heart? Like, yes, slice it up. Just give me a little slice of pizza, and the rest of the pie is for all the other gals, right? You're not good with that. How insecure could that possibly make someone feel? I mean, like, what are you doing with the other 75% of your heart? if I've only got 25%? That would be an awful feeling for anybody in that position. There was another guy that I know, and I think this has happened multiple times, that asked one of the girls that was on the show to marry him, right? I guess the whole thing ends with them doing a big ceremony and him giving the final rose and, will you marry me? And does all that stuff, right? And they're somewhere, they're in Aruba or wherever they're at, right? They're never out in front of Mighty Taco doing this. That never happens, right? They're in some great dreamland scenario, right? And he asks her to marry him, but then the guy backs out and he's like, you know what? This is after the show's over. He's like, you know what? I've thought about it. And no. It's the other girl that was on the show. And so he just drops her and goes to the other girl on the show. Even if you're the girl who's now the guy's catch, you're still insecure because is he going to do the same thing to me that he did to her? It's a terrible place to be. And I guess for the guy, it has to be pretty insecure as well if you're the bachelor, because you've got to be thinking, right? You've got to be thinking, is this girl who is way, way better looking than me, I have so far outkicked my coverage on this deal, who fell in love with me because every date is paid for by the producers on ABC. And now she's going to realize I don't have money. And every time we go to eat, there's not going to be a personal fireworks show as we click our champagne glasses together. But instead I'll be like, you like Applebee's? And it's going to be that. Is she going to still stay with me at that point? Well, you know the answer to that. He's got to be insecure around that idea, and it's true for all of them. And here's the thing, that we live in a bachelor culture where insecurity is the norm. Insecurity for people, we just kind of live in that culture. That's part of the reason I think that people are attracted to watching the show, is because we who are insecure want to see seemingly perfect people deal with their own insecurities, and it makes us feel a little bit better. Now that's true about our culture, I think, but I think what I'm concerned about as a pastor, as a follower of Jesus, is when that kind of culture starts to invade the culture of faith. That we as people who follow Jesus now are wrapped up in insecurities because of all the things that we see around us. And I'll tell you why it's a problem. Because what insecurity ends up being is the spiritual concern that we don't get God's whole heart. That's what happens to us. Because it starts to infect us and we think to ourselves, I'm insecure now spiritually because I don't know that I get God's whole heart. What's driving some of the insecurity that we feel? Well, there's a bunch of things, right? Failure's one of them. You've experienced it before. Some of you come from backgrounds where maybe you were always told how imperfect you are and how you can never measure up. And others of you come from backgrounds where you were told how perfect you are and you could never do anything wrong. And both of those things set you up for failure. And so maybe when when your mom was saying how awesome you are at sports, when you really weren't good at that sport, you're really great at other stuff, but you really weren't good at that sport, and then you got cut from the team, and you're like, you don't know what to do, right? You're blown down by failure. Or maybe it has to do with, an audition that you had that you didn't get, or maybe the grades that you thought you were going to get that you didn't get, and you found yourself failing. You know why you fail? Because you're imperfect. All of us are. And we're always going to face failure in the world that we live in. It's just reality. But some of us don't know how to handle or deal with it, and as a result, we live in insecurity because of failure. Or maybe it's because of rejection. You felt that, right? Maybe you've gone through a really rough breakup before, or you've been set up, right? I remember as a middle school student this is before my voice changed or I had hair under my armpits. I'm in middle school, dude. I didn't even grow until I was 30. I was so small, I was small, high voice, but I still thought I was the stuff because you're in middle school, right? And you think you're the stuff. It doesn't matter that you don't brush your teeth before you go to school. It's like you still think you're the stuff. And there was this one girl, and I saw, back in the day, we used to have textbooks, and we would cover those textbooks with like lunch sack material. I don't know, like garbage sack material. We would just cut out stuff and we would put them around our textbooks. That's how old I am, right? And you could write and you could draw all over those things, and it was great. She had this textbook covered in just this statement, I love Jerry. She must have had it on the front cover, the back cover, inside the flyleaf. She must have written it 1,000 times on her deal. Everybody started saying, hey man, have you seen, we'll call her Cheryl, because that was her name. It's not like you know her, right? It's not like you know her. That would be awful if she ever heard this, right? Her name's Cheryl. And she had written this all over the thing, you know, and everybody was like, man, have you seen Cheryl's book? Have you seen Cheryl's textbook? And I'm like, yeah, I've seen it. Actually, I said, yeah, I've seen it. That's exactly how it went, right? Yeah. Why wouldn't she love me? I mean, I'm like 4'8", 73 pounds of man. Everybody. Ladies are standing in line, right? It wasn't true. But here's the thing. It actually wasn't me. It was a dude named Jerry at another school. And everybody knew that but me. Thank you. Thank you. I'm at a Christian school. You people have empathy. I've told that story at other places and they started just and I'm like, what? I need counseling after this speaking on the. So I know what rejection feels like, and maybe you faced it as well, right? It ended up good though, because I got the girl. She's right down here and she's gorgeous. So not Cheryl. Not Cheryl. Cheryl's on her own, man. I don't know where she's at. I'm praying for her. You need to pray for her tonight. She's writing on. I'm just messing with you. Oh, man. Failure, rejection, those all drive insecurity. So does comparison. Comparison drives insecurity. I mean, I'm married to a woman, so I know one or two things about women. Literally, I know one or two things about women. Because I'm married to a woman, right? And she's great, but she's helped me understand how women sometimes think. You go into a social setting and you size them up, right? You're looking at them like, what's she wearing? Man, that's nice. I don't have that. My shorts are stupid, you know? And you start thinking about that because you're comparing yourself all of a sudden to them. How did she get that figure? What is she doing? Does she not eat? Where does she work out? Like, what is she doing? Does she pray? Does Jesus take weight off of her life? What just happened? What is going on, right? And you've got these comparisons that are going on, and you wrestle with them and you struggle with them, and it builds in insecurity. Or you're on your social media platforms, right? And you're on Instagram, and you know you're about to have break, right? You're getting winter break, and you're seeing all your friends, and like their families are in Aruba and Bora Bora, and they're taking all these Instagram pictures. You know, here's me. Here's me with a fish. Here's me with a shark. Here's me with a, it's all that, right? And you're sitting there thinking to yourself, man, oh man, they're doing some awesome stuff. And all I'm doing is eating Cheetos, watching reruns of Drake and Josh or something on Nickelodeon, right? I'm reliving the glory days. And it's a Nickelodeon marathon. I'm just shoving Cheetos in my mouth, right? You're thinking to yourself, I do not compare here. This is not good. Man, it happens to dudes too, right? You're sizing guys up. Maybe they got more muscles than you. Maybe their, girlfriend's prettier or whatever. You get all of that. Or you look around at your friends who are preparing for graduation and they've got everything lined up. It's like, I'm graduating with honors and I've got a job and I'm going to get married and I'm going to have 2.3 kids and a picket fence and a dog. And, you start going, what, dude? Like I've got my Crayolas going. I want to, oh man. Comparison's deadly because it either makes you feel inferior or superior. And neither of those are good for your soul. That's what comparison does to us. Is that when we compare with somebody that we feel we're better than, then we feel superior. And that's not true. And then we maybe look and we see somebody that we don't measure up to, but we know that we're better than other people, but we feel inferior as a result of where we measure up to them. And so it is deadly for our soul. Now, all of these things lead us to insecurity. But here's the question. What's behind all of those things that are leading us to insecurity? What's behind failure? What's behind rejection? What's behind comparison? I'll tell you, idolatry. We have other gods before God. You see, that's why I started in this direction. Because with failure, sometimes what we have held up is the idol of success. And sometimes what we have with rejection is the idol of people appreciation. And sometimes with comparison, what we've held up is the idol of control or the idol of power. And in other words, like Keller says, we've let good things become bad things because we've made them ultimate things. That's why I come back to this. You see, young men, young ladies, whoever has the loudest voice and the greatest power to determine who you are and what you're worth, that is your God. Whoever has the loudest voice and the greatest power to determine who you are and what you're worth, that is your God. That's why the first commandment comes first. You shall have no other gods before me, because we live in a culture of insecurity that is driven by lesser gods. It is driven by false gods, and these lesser gods and these false gods, listen to this, they are half-hearted. You don't get all of them. You get enough to keep you coming back, to suck you in, to drive you crazy, but you don't get satisfied. You're not finding that full satisfaction in these things because it keeps leaving you empty, and it keeps leaving you insecure, and it keeps leaving you feeling like you are flailing in the wind. You see, only the true God, the one who is revealed in the Old Testament, who we then see revealed in the New Testament, only the true God has given us His whole heart. And He has demonstrated that by the gift of His Son, Jesus. You see, Jesus, ladies and gentlemen, is the heart of God. What we see when we see Jesus is we see God in the flesh. God put skin on and moved into the neighborhood. This is what we see, the fullness of God in bodily form. Jesus is the heart of God. And because God gave us Jesus, God has given us His whole heart. That's why, young men and young ladies, that we keep having to ask the question, when are we going to let Jesus have the loudest voice and the greatest power to determine what we are worth and who we are? Because He is the one that is God above all. You see, we sometimes get all of that out of balance, because ultimately insecurity can be not only bad for us, but if we'll allow it to, if you'll allow it to, insecurity can actually be an invitation to find your security in Jesus. Insecurity can be an invitation to you to find your security in Jesus. I mean, if you just listen to what Jesus says, you can hear Him speaking through failure and saying, is any one of you burdened and heavy laden? Come to me. I'll give you rest. You can hear Jesus speaking through rejection when He says, all that the Father has given me, everyone that comes to me, I will in no way cast aside. I will in no way put them away. I'll receive them. You can hear Jesus saying to you through this idea of comparison what He ends up saying to Peter in John chapter 21. You know the story, right? Peter had denied that he even knew Jesus. You think, man, that's all she wrote for Peter. Peter not only did that, but he was swearing and cursing that he didn't know Jesus. It wasn't just that Peter said, I don't know Him, leave me alone, and he got scared. Man, just a few hours before, he was cutting dudes' ears off in the Garden of Gethsemane. And then he freaked out when a young girl said, aren't you one of those disciples, as he's outside of Caiaphas's place and he's warming his hands by the fire? Aren't you with Jesus? And Peter says, I don't know what you're talking about. And she says, I think I hear a Galilean accent here. I'm pretty sure you're with Jesus. I don't know what you're talking about. And then above him, all these bubbles pop up. Blankety, blank, 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 blank. Right? He's really adamant about it. And then Jesus is crucified. He dies. Peter bolts. He hears rumors about Jesus not being there, but he hasn't seen him. Peter goes back to fishing. And he's there with some of his other buddies. Why? Because the only security, he was feeling so insecure in that moment, he went back to what he knew. He held on to what he knew. He knew how to throw a net. Actually, he wasn't even that good, because every time we see him in the Bible, it seems like Peter's out there fishing, and he's like, I've been fishing all night and I haven't caught anything. And Jesus, the carpenter, is actually telling the fishermen how to fish. Why don't you cast your net on the other side? How about doing that, you know? So you've got Peter's out there fishing, and then Jesus shows up on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Peter jumps in, runs to Jesus. Jesus sits with him by the fire after he's made breakfast for him. He says, Peter, do you love me? He said, Lord, you know I love you. And he said, feed my sheep. And then he said it a second time. And he said it a third time. And he said it with nuance in each of those times. And then Peter, sitting next to Jesus, who for every denial now has said he loves Jesus 3 times. He sees John, another disciple. And Jesus has just said to Peter, they're going to take you away, and they're going to bind your hands and feet. And he was basically saying to Peter, this is how you're going to die. He was telling Peter, you're going to die. And it looks like it's going to be by crucifixion, which history tells us Peter was crucified upside down, actually. And then he ends that statement by saying, hey, Peter, yeah, I want you to follow me, but you're going to die for it. And then he ends up by just kind of restating it. And he says, follow me. Peter says, what about John? Have you seen that dude? You remember when we were in the boat? Jesus, you remember, right? When we were in the boat and like there was a lot of water and there's a storm and everybody's freaking out. And then you came walking out on the water and everybody's like, it's a ghost, right? And John, like, they're freaking out. And I said, if it's you, Jesus, tell me to come to you on the water. And remember, I got out of the boat and I walked on the water. And where's John? He's over in the corner, sucking his thumb, drinking a milk bottle, looking for his mama. What about him? Does he have to die? Told me I've got to. And Jesus says to Peter, it's none of your business what to do with him. If I want him to live until I come back, that's my business. You, Peter, you follow me. Why? Because you're never going to find your satisfaction in comparison. You're going to find your satisfaction in me. You see, sometimes insecurity is an invitation to find your security in Jesus. Exodus 20, verse number 3. You shall have no other gods before me. Father, I pray that you would write this truth on the heart of every young man and young woman here, that they might find their security in you. I pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Thank you, guys.